Parental rights and First Amendment rights are hanging in the balance at the Supreme Court and in the Colorado legislature. We will be going through the Supreme Court case as well as the various bills in Colorado today and why they really, really matter, especially for children. We've got all of this and more on today's episode of Relatable. Hey y'all, welcome to Relatable. Happy Wednesday. Hope everyone is having a wonderful week so far. All right, I want to remind you guys to subscribe to blazetv.com/Allie. We have a beautiful, very unique new special out with author Danielle Hitchens. She writes some of my favorite children's books ever, the Baby Believer books. They're incredible primers on theology, but also she uses shapes and emotions and sounds and all different kinds of things. So you are simultaneously teaching your children biblical truth and historical Christianity, as well as all of the other good things that you want them to learn, like their numbers and their letters. And in this particular special, we are talking about the church calendar. So how to base your life and your family's life off of the historic church calendar, the liturgical calendar, rather than the craziness and the chaos of your school or work or sports schedules. And it's just a beautiful reminder that the pace of our lives should be driven by Christ, and to really slow things down and to live a life of stability and peace based on the celebrations that the Christian life is based on. So I just really loved the conversation. I found it to be very enlightening and educational for me, and certainly a different perspective for how we conduct the rhythms in our homes. And so we've got that as well as other content that is exclusive to Blaze TV subscribers. It's really important to us that you subscribe to Blaze TV. I mean, it means a lot to us because it's a different kind of community there. I'm so thankful for everyone who watches on YouTube and watches on Apple Podcasts. It's really important to me to have a free version of this podcast for everyone to be able to access, but we can put different kind of content behind the paywall, and it's also a way to protect ourselves from censorship. While we still get to disseminate this show on places like YouTube and Apple Podcasts and Spotify, you just never know how long that is going to last and what's going to be the final straw before they say, nope, we're suppressing this or we're taking your show down. And if you subscribe to Blaze TV, then that ensures that you will always be able to see not only this podcast, but also the exclusive content that I and many others like Glenn Beck and Steve Dace and Liz Wheeler are putting out for subscribers. So if you go to blazetv.com/Allie, you can subscribe, get access to all that content, and you'll also get a discount on that subscription when you do that. Okay, before we get into our stories, I do just want to remind you, ladies out there, it's time to sign up for Share the Arrows. You've been thinking about it. You've been wondering, should I do it? You've been like, I don't like flying, which I don't blame you at all. You know, I have my long list of airport rules and air travel attire that people should be wearing. And unfortunately, people break those rules chronically. So if you're like, I don't know if I want to get on a plane and see someone's bare feet, I understand. And let me tell you how awesome this conference is. This conference would be worth you getting on an airplane, sitting for 2 hours next to someone barefoot. Yeah. And that's coming from me. Okay. That's how amazing this conference is going to be. So no matter where you live, I think it is well worth it for you to take the road trip, for you to fly all the way to Dallas, Texas, and the location in Allen, Texas is really close to the airport, so it's very convenient. Share the Arrows. We're going to have apologist Elisa Childers. I mean, she absolutely brought it last year. I was like, got to bring her back. Y'all loved her so much. Ginger Duggar-Volo, she's been on the show several times. Y'all know who she is, her incredible testimony. Shauna Holman, Taylor Dukes. How do we approach health, holistic healing from a biblical perspective? Also, two women with incredible testimonies. Katie Faust, we've had her on several times. She is one of your and my favorite guest, talking about how we have child-centered politics and how we must think about the well-being of children over the wants of adults, especially when it comes to reproductive technology. Worship led by Francesca Battistelli, which is just otherworldly incredible. And then we've got 2 more women that will be on a panel about motherhood and homemaking and how to lead our children as mothers well and how to love our husbands well. And so it's just going to be amazing. There's so many women's conferences out there, and a lot of them are really awesome. But it is unique, I believe, to have a women's conference that isn't just focused on self-esteem, isn't just focused on high emotions, but is rather focused on equipping women with deep theology, with serious apologetics, with practical wisdom that you can apply to both the private and the public sphere, no matter where God has called you, whether you are married and a mom or not, whether you're single, whether you are 18 or whether you are 88 years old. Like, this is the women's conference for you. I will be speaking as well. And I'm just so excited. I love seeing your faces. I love meeting you. It's an amazing, amazing conference, and I don't want you to miss it. So Related Bros out there, get your wife Share the Arrows tickets. Get her 2 Share the Arrows tickets in case she wants to bring a friend. And if you're a related gal out there, go ahead and get your tickets. ShareTheArrows.com. That's ShareTheArrows.com. All right. Now, without further ado, we will actually get into the stories that we have to get into today, and I'll call on Bree to bring in some clarity when needed. There's a lot of news stuff that we haven't covered. Yesterday, we went into King of Kings, and so if you want to know about that movie, whether you should bring your kids to see it, go back, listen to, or watch that episode. But now we're finally going to get into some political and news items that we've been meaning to talk about and just haven't had time. So first, I want to talk about this case that SCOTUS is hearing right now, Mahmoud versus Taylor. And this has to do with LGBTQ plus content, books in school libraries. So quite the intersection of the things that we talk about on this show. Here's a summary. Yesterday, the Supreme Court heard arguments in a case addressing whether Montgomery County Public Schools in Maryland violated parents' First Amendment right to free exercise of religion by not allowing parents to opt their children out of lessons involving LGBT plus storybooks. According to SCOTUS blog, and this is a very reliable source of information for what's going on at SCOTUS, when the county announced in 2023 that it would not allow parents to opt to have their children excused from instruction involving the storybooks, a group of Muslim, Catholic, and Ukrainian Orthodox parents went to federal court on the grounds that not allowing parents to opt out of this curriculum for their children violated their First Amendment rights. 2 of these books include one where a girl attends her uncle's gay wedding and another titled Pride Puppy, where a puppy gets lost at a pride parade. So this case has now made its way up to the Supreme Court. And yesterday, Justice Brett Kavanaugh brought up in the hearing that there are other situations where parents can opt out of certain curriculum, but it's a little strange when it comes to LGBTQ-centered curriculum in Montgomery County in Maryland that these parents apparently weren't able to opt out. Here's Satu.
In the country has opt-outs for all sorts of things. The county has opt-outs for all sorts of things. The other Maryland counties have opt-outs for all sorts of things. And yet for this one thing, they changed in mid-year and say no more opt-outs. I'm just not understanding feasibility. And here, they're not asking you to change what's taught in the classroom. They're not asking you to change that at all. A lot of the rhetoric suggests that they might have, that they were trying to do that, but that's not what they're trying to do. They're only seeking to be able to walk out so that they don't have to, the parents don't have their children exposed to these things that are contrary to their own beliefs.
These parents are being represented by a law firm called Beckett. It's a nonprofit, nonpartisan law firm that they say that they protect the free expression of all religious traditions. And Kristen Wagner is the CEO of Alliance Defending Freedom. And while they are not directly involved in this case, this falls under the purview of what they do. And so she offered insight on X about this. Kristen Wagner says, anyone who cares about parental rights or religious liberty should be aware of a major case on today's docket at the U.S. Supreme Supreme Court. In Mahmoud v. Taylor, Beckett is representing a diverse group of parents against the School Board of Montgomery County, Maryland. In 2023, so some of this is repetitive, the board announced, contrary to Maryland law and the Constitution, that it would no longer allow parents to opt their children out of sensitive lessons regarding gender or sexuality. Essentially, the school board has mandated a new orthodoxy of belief, which must be taught to all children, even against parents' wishes. Practically, this looks like 3- and 4-year-olds, so even preschoolers that are going to these public institutions, viewing picture books that promote pride parades, elementary-aged children being taught about quote-unquote gender transitions, and children who express opposing views being told their family's values are hurtful. ADF Legal has filed an amicus brief, and we fully support Beckett's important advocacy in this case. The ruling in Mahmoud could significantly bolster our own efforts to fight another egregious abuse of parental rights at school, the secret social transitioning of children behind their parents' backs. And she said this was on the 22nd. So yesterday, I'm praying for today's argument. May justice be done and may the families prevail. Yes and amen. Praying that right along with her. Alan Schoenfeld, who is the attorney representing the Maryland School Board, who of course is saying, nope, can't opt out of this. You have to be indoctrinated with these beliefs. He maintained in his arguments that the school board had tried to allow to opt out of instruction, to allow parents to opt out of instruction, but it wasn't feasible, he said, due to the sheer amount or sheer number of students that were opting out. He said it wasn't possible for school officials to make arrangements for the space, supervision, and alternate instruction needed for the many students who would opt out. Okay, well, that's probably indicating a problem, right? If this many parents of this many backgrounds at your public institution are saying this is revolting to us, this is offensive to us, we don't want our kids learning this, well, then I don't know, maybe you shouldn't be teaching kids that. What's important here is that this is basically a religious doctrine that a public institution is forcing children to imbibe. Remember this, okay? Secularism is not neutral. Whenever you hear people saying, oh, well, your religious views, your Christianity shouldn't affect curriculum or it shouldn't affect the law. Look, a worldview, a religion is going to affect every policy and every law. There is nothing that is neutral. Every law, every policy that we have on the books reflects what someone thinks about right and wrong, which is based upon their beliefs, their philosophical beliefs, their religious beliefs. Even atheism itself isn't neutral. An atheist still has their own beliefs about what is right and what is wrong, and that is based on their own personal belief system. So the question is, which worldview wins? And so secular progressivism has its own assumptions. It has its own mantras, its own dogmas. The idea, for example, that a boy can become a girl is not a scientific, neutral, secular viewpoint. I mean, I guess you could say it is secular, but it's certainly not neutral or scientific. That is a superstitious belief. The idea that a baby doesn't really become human until they pass through the birth canal isn't based on objective fact or science. Like, that is your own personal subjective belief. And so you're saying, you secular progressive teacher, administrator, politician, that your worldview has the right to dominate. But if a Christian says, actually, no, I think that my idea, my Christian biblical idea of life inside the womb and the immutability of gender, that's a better argument, that should prevail, that enacts the least amount of harm on children. And so I want that to define our policy. All of a sudden, that's Christian nationalism and that's fascism. What I think is so interesting and actually important about this case is that you do have people of all different kinds of backgrounds, that you do have Muslim parents that are coming forward and saying, absolutely not. My children are not going to be a part of this. And while I don't think that should be necessary in creating a compelling argument for a lot of people who are just instinctively anti-Christian and who think Christians are the only ones that have a problem with LGBTQ stuff, this does make it more credible, which is why I think the majority of justices do seem to be sympathetic to the parents. Justices Sotomayor and Jackson, of course, they are extremely progressive. They are activists. They don't care at all really about the Constitution when you look at their arguments. They argue that exposure to these books did not amount to coercion and express concerns about how far the parents' opt-out request could extend. Well, it can extend as far as they want it to. I think that's fine. Now, you might have a problem if a parent doesn't want their child to learn a certain thing. You might disagree with that, but that's not your child. That's not your child. And of course, in all of this, I think every parent that possibly can, and not every parent can, but every parent that possibly can, should ensure that their child has, if you're a Christian education, whether that's at home, whether that's a hybrid situation, or whether that is in a Christian school. That doesn't mean that education is going to be perfect, but it is going to have the same biblical basis idea that you are, so you're not having to battle against your teachers who are actively seeking to disciple your child's mind with an anti-biblical worldview. Not all teachers, but the system in general, that's exactly what they're trying to do. And so, this just goes to show the public school system is willing to literally go to the Supreme Court to fight to teach your 4 and 5-year-old that they can butcher their bodies and become the opposite gender. That's how much the left cares about this. They care about butchering and perverting your child so much that they will literally fight for their right to do so, to force your child to learn this stuff all the way up to the Supreme Court, okay? So if you have something in your mind, this delusion in your mind that the left has maybe laid down since Donald Trump became president, that they're taking a step back, no. They want to coerce your child into believing things that are not true and destructive for them. And they will go to every single length to do that. And you need to be willing to fight just as hard to protect your child's mind and to indoctrinate. That means place doctrines in them that are good and right and true. Because if you are not discipling your children, someone else will. If you are not protecting your children, Satan is prowling around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour, and children are extremely vulnerable. That's why they are always the unconsenting subjects of progressive social experiments. God has placed you in their lives, parents, to protect them from the predation of bad actors who only want bad things for them. So good for these parents who I'm sure I have plenty of disagreements with theologically, but they're fighting for their kids, and I'm very thankful for that. Thank you to Beckett. Thank you to ADF and to all the organizations, First Liberty, all the organizations that fight for our First Amendment rights. I'm very thankful for them. All right, we've got some other crazy laws just showing you how far progressives will go to promote evil. And if you think that's too much of a black and white statement, just wait till you hear what's happening in Colorado. Let me pause and tell you about our first sponsor for the day, and that is Adele Natural Cosmetics. Y'all know how much I love Adele. One of the products that I use the most comes from Adele, and that is the everyday cleanser, the oil-based cleanser that I use every morning, every night. And you can use it as many times as you want throughout the day, unlike some other facial cleansers, because it doesn't strip your skin down the way other facial cleansers do, because it's oil-based. It's got olive oil in it. It's got other natural ingredients. You will never find anything fake in Adele Natural Cosmetics. You're not going to find synthetic perfumes or any endocrine disruptors. It really is good for your skin. It is all handcrafted in Texas by this family-owned business. It's owned by Arlene and her family. They are the real deal, salt of the earth, unapologetic, pro-life Christians. They love America. They share our values, and they make top-notch products. I use their oil-based cleanser. I use their everyday moisturizing spray. I love their serums. It's all really good. And when I'm not in the studio, I use their moisturizing foundation, their bronzer stick, their blush. I really like it, especially if you're going for that natural glowy look. It is just the best. Also, their Blue Lagoon line is amazing. Their Blue Lagoon face balm is a must-have for your skincare collection. It smells really good. It is ultra moisturizing. Now, just for the month of April, you can get this Blue Lagoon face balm for free with your order if you spend $135 or more. It is well worth your investment. Good, high-quality natural skincare. It's going to cost more, but it is worth it for how good it is for your body. So if you spend $135 or more, you'll get that Blue Lagoon face balm. Go to AdeleNaturalCosmetics.com. When you use my code Allie, you'll get 25% off your first time purchase. That's ADEL naturalcosmetics.com, code Allie. So we won't know the results of that Supreme Court case, the decision on it, probably until about mid-June. Right now, there's a lot going on in the state of Colorado. And y'all, there's a book, I forget what it's called, someone out there probably knows, but it's a book about how Colorado, which used to be this deep red, mostly rural mountain state with good-hearted, salt of the earth mountain people turned blue. And yes, it's demographics. People just moved in from places like California. Also, the homegrown people there became more progressive. But there was a whole strategy to turn Colorado blue. And it is a very sad state of things, because just like in places like Washington and Oregon and even California, you have a lot of good traditional conservative people who have lived there for a long time and have seen many of their beloved towns like Denver, like Colorado Springs, even like Boulder, deteriorate because of progressive policies. And Colorado has become one of the most rabidly progressive states. Bree notes that the book might be, I actually don't know if it was Bree or Kimberly who put this in, but The Blueprint, How the Democrats Won Colorado and Why Republicans Everywhere Should Care. I think that is the title of the book that I was referencing. I'm sure it has a lot of interesting insights for you, whether that was the book that I was originally referencing or not. But here's what's going on that indicates just how far left Colorado has gotten. So this month, 4 Colorado bills, which aim to enhance protections and access to, that's euphemistic language, to quote unquote gender affirming care, reproductive health care, transgender rights, were voted on. So if we want to break down what those euphemisms actually mean, because none of them are true, if you are affirming your gender, you don't need surgery to do that. You are the gender that you were at conception. So that means butchering bodies, reproductive health care, that means butchering the bodies of babies inside the womb, and transgender rights, the denial of reality. So all these bills are voted on in Colorado. One has passed and is awaiting signature. That's the abortion one, awaiting signature from the governor. One has passed with amendments sent back to the Senate, and 2 are pending Senate approval. So some of these are still vulnerable to not getting passed, and we don't want them to get passed. And so as I go through them, if you are living in the state of Colorado, you need to call your state senators, the people who represent you, and make sure that your voice is heard. And we will talk about some efforts that are happening right now in Colorado churches trying to stop these bills, because they really are so destructive and evil. So let's look at HB 25 first. This is called Protect Access to Gender-Affirming Healthcare. Whenever you see that word access used by progressives, what they mean is that they are forcing you to pay for something. They're forcing the taxpayer to pay for something, to pay for transition, so-called, or to pay for abortion. And this grants access to people who maybe wouldn't otherwise be able to afford it without the help of taxpayer dollars, or without the state forcing, say, insurance companies to cover the cost of these procedures. So this bill codifies protections for gender-affirming healthcare in state law. It mandates that all health insurance plans in Colorado cover, quote, medically necessary gender-affirming care. Well, no gender-affirming care is medically necessary, as determined by a healthcare provider, including hormone therapy, psychiatric care, and surgeries like facial, breast, or genital reconstruction. If you have not listened to my conversations with several detransitioners, then I encourage you, please go back and do that. My conversation with Daisy, my conversation with Soren, my conversation with Laura Perry Smalt, and you will see that the endocrinologists, that the psychiatrists, that the medical professionals that approved their surgeries and approved their transitions were not doing so because these things were medically necessary, but because they are ideologically captured and motivated, okay? Anything can be medically necessary if you have a worldview that tells you that you can feel something that is different than your biological reality, and that internal feeling actually trumps biological reality. So all of these words are very malleable. Here are the things that health insurance companies must provide, are coerced to provide by the Colorado state government if this bill passes. So hormone therapy, so a man being injected with artificial estrogen that would make him appear more like a woman, never really looks like a woman, but more like a woman. So a blepharoplasty, eye and lid, forehead or neck skin tightening, facial bone remodeling, genioplasty. It can be different kinds of facial reconstruction, lip lift or augmentation. medically necessary, y'all. Mandibular angle augmentation. So these are all different kinds of facial reconstruction, rhinoplasty, hair removal, breast augmentation, reduction, or reconstruction, genital and non-genital surgical procedures. I'm going to let you in on a little secret. If you have to have any of those things to look like a particular gender, you probably aren't. You just probably aren't. Like if you're a man whose face needs to be broken and reconstructed to look like some kind of semblance of a female, you were never meant to be that. And I say that in love. It might be harsh, but I say it in love because a God created you as a man at the moment of conception, and you will never, ever be a woman. It doesn't matter what you wear. It doesn't matter what you sound like. It doesn't matter what surgeries you get. You will never be a woman. No one will even ever see you as a woman. And even the people in your life that call you she, her, or call you Kelly or Stacy or Jamie or whatever it is, they don't even believe that you're a woman. And they would be offended if someone told them that they look like a trans woman. I just want you to realize that, and that you are a man, and that you are more handsome as a man, and that you are needed as a man, and your masculinity is a good thing. And I'm sorry if anyone ever hurt you and told you that it wasn't. And the same exact thing applies to a woman who is trying to be a man. You are a woman, and I'm sure that has been weaponized against you. Maybe you have been a victim of assault, but you will never, ever be the opposite sex. And I have talked to so many broken men and women who believed the lie that they could become the opposite sex, that everyone else was wrong and they were right and their internal feelings were right, that were exacerbated by their pornography use, by the abuse that they endured, whatever it was. And it's a lie. And you could be rendered permanently sterile. You will never, ever recover from some of these surgeries. And your body as a man is not meant to house all of that estrogen. Your body as a woman is not meant to house all of that testosterone. It is physically bad for you. It is mentally bad for you. It is spiritually bad for you. You were made in God's image. You were bought with a price by Jesus Christ on the cross, and he cares for you, and nothing you have ever done makes you too far off or beyond redemption or salvation. So I want you to recognize that you are a man or woman made in God's image, that you are loved by God, and you can be saved by Jesus, okay? And I don't want you to keep going down this path. And any law that makes it easier for someone to get further and further from who they are biologically and further into delusion, we should oppose. And it's not because we hate people. It's actually because we love them, and we know that God's ways are always better. And if we love our neighbor, we want God's ways for our neighbor. And yes, that does mean through policy. Remember, no policy is neutral. And so Christians have every right and every responsibility to try to infuse truth and light and goodness into policy making in the state of Colorado and elsewhere. And then there's another part of HB 25. This is 1312. So the other segment that I just described was 1309. This is 1312. It's known as the Kelly Loving Act. It was passed by the Colorado House on April 6th, and it now awaits review in the Colorado Senate. And so this is a very, very scary part of this bill. The courts must consider deadnaming, all these euphemisms, misgendering, threats to publish material related to gender-affirming healthcare, so like outing someone, as coercive control when determining parenting time and child custody. So they must look at all of these things when they are determining parental custody in like a divorce custody battle. When it comes to how these parents treat their children, courts shall evaluate reports of coercive control to allocate parental responsibilities based on the child's best interests. But coercive control, so they could accuse a parent of coercive control. Like if a parent, for example, threatens to publish the individual's sensitive personal information, including sexually explicit material or material related to gender-affirming healthcare services, or make reports to the police or authorities, or deadnaming or misgendering the individual or individual's child or relative. Okay, so if a parent in a custody battle is either calling the other parent, say a woman in a custody battle, she's getting a divorce from her husband, who now has declared that he is a woman, his name is Sally. If she keeps on referring to him as Frank, keeps on saying he, him, or say they have a child who claims that they are gender confused, and the little boy named Jack now says that his name is Gracie, and the mom refuses to go along with it, refuses to to call this child by this new name, then the judge has to, according to this law, consider that when allocating custody to each parent. So the parent who acknowledges the reality of their ex-spouse's gender, or acknowledges the reality of their child, refuses to affirm these newfound identities, then that parent could be punished, and should be punished, really, if you look at this bill, in cases of a custody battle. And so that's what's going on. That basically the state will steal your child from you, will take away your custody rights from your child if you affirm biological reality. It also prohibits Colorado courts from enforcing or recognizing another state's law that allows child removal from a parent or guardian for supporting gender-affirming healthcare services. So if a parent in Texas, for example, the judge decided because one of the parties is actually pushing their child toward transitioning, and that judge in Texas says, okay, no, we're taking away your rights because of that. Colorado is not going to recognize that. So Colorado is becoming almost like a sanctuary state for these parents who want to transition their child. It requires any chosen name policy by local education providers, educators, or contractors to be inclusive of all reasons a student might adopt a chosen name, differing from their legal name. So a teacher will be obligated to call Jack Gracie, even if it violates her beliefs. Mandates that school dress codes must not enforce gender-based rules and must allow students to choose any dress code variation. I mean, think about that. Not only are you allowing a boy to dress up as a girl and vice versa, just sowing so much confusion and perversion in these young, impressionable minds, but there's just no sense of modesty anymore because apparently that's gender-based bias. Defines deadnaming and misgendering, so calling someone by their real name, as discriminatory acts under the Colorado Anti-Discrimination Act. This is from the bill. It is a discriminatory practice and unlawful to, with specific intent to discriminate, publish materials that deadname or misgender an individual. The refusal of a pre-publication request for the publisher to use an individual's chosen name, honorifics, or pronouns can serve as evidence of the intent required by subsection 6A of this section. Now, I don't have on here what the punishment will be if someone violates that. I'm sure someone out there has the punitive details that are included in this bill, but it will be against the law in these entities to use the quote unquote wrong name for someone who says that they are now the opposite sex. And so this is anti-First Amendment. This is anti-parental rights. And this should scare the ever-living daylights out of you. And again, this is how far Democrats will go to violate your rights. So while they're all pretending out there like they care about due process, they care about the First Amendment when it comes to deporting MS-13 gang members, they don't. I mean, Colorado is the same place where Jack Phillips, the baker from Masterpiece Cake Shop, has been targeted for over a decade by progressive activists, by the courts in Colorado, because he simply refused to bake a cake that celebrated a gay wedding and refused to bake a cake that celebrated a so-called gender transition. And they haven't let him live in peace. It's not live and let live. It's not believe whatever you want to as long as you don't impose it on me. It's that you can't believe whatever you want to, and you certainly cannot live it out, even in your own private business that you own. That's what the left believes. So whenever they accuse you of being a fascist, just remember the state of Colorado. All right, we've got a couple more things happening there, but let me pause and tell you about our next sponsor for the day. It's Good Ranchers. You guys know how much I love Good Ranchers. We eat it almost every night. I love the ground beef really the most because I think it's the most versatile. We love making enchiladas and tacos and burritos and all that kind of stuff. If you can't tell, I love Tex-Mex, but we also love hamburgers, and it's just so versatile. It tastes really good. We love grilling their chicken as well. They've got seafood. They've got seed oil-free chicken nuggets, which is really unique. I haven't found a single other company that makes seed oil-free chicken nuggets. And the best part is it's all from American farms and ranches. And because of that, you don't have to worry about the effect of tariffs on the prices of your meat from Good Ranchers. Tariffs are only impacting the meat and the products that are being imported from overseas. And so you don't have to worry about that. When something is homegrown, you get the benefit of that price protection, and it makes your life so much easier. The meat is shipped to your front door on dry ice every month, and you don't have to think about going to the grocery store and picking the right kind of meat. If you go to goodranchers.com/Allie, code Allie, get $40 off your order. That's goodranchers.com/Allie, code Allie. All right, SB 25, this is the one that is heading to the governor's desk right now, so it is almost signed into law. Unfortunately, it passed the House and the Senate just a few days ago, and it conforms, quote unquote, abortion rights. It updates the state statutes to reflect Amendment 79, which repealed the constitutional ban on public funding for abortions and enshrined the right to abortion, prohibiting state and local governments from denying, impeding, or discriminating against this so-called right. It also, again, mandates insurance coverage. So the insurance companies have to cover the cost of abortion. Your taxpayer dollars in Colorado have to cover the cost of abortion. And Colorado is allowed through all 9 months in the state of, in all 9 months throughout the state. And it is one of the most radical laws regarding abortion in the country. And that's actually where a lot of the late-term abortions that occur in this country happen. And we've talked about this in the Atlantic and the New York Times. Some of the most prolific abortionists live and practice in Colorado. And no, they are not doing abortions on women who have serious health issues. It's not because of fetal anomalies. They have actually admitted that they are performing these abortions because these women want abortions. And by the way, there is never, ever, ever a medical reason to have an abortion in the third trimester. It doesn't even make sense. I mean, after 24 weeks, at least after 24 weeks, you deliver that baby and that baby can go to NICU and the mom can get the care that she needs. If the baby's going to come out either way, there's no reason to kill the baby before he or she comes out. It doesn't even make any logical sense. And so people are having abortions in the third trimester when they're having them at least 10,000 times a year, by the way, according to the Guttmacher Institute, which is Planned Parenthood's research arm. Those late-term abortions, third trimester abortions, are happening at least 10,000 times a year, many of them happening in the state of Colorado. And now Colorado is saying you are going to pay for them. So again, when people try to tell you that you, Christian, you just need to leave your beliefs at home, you don't need to infuse your beliefs into this fight, that is just a silencing and manipulation tactic, because progressives are forcing you to not only conform to their ideas, but to fund their ideas. So while they're calling you a fascist, they are using every bit of power they have to push their demonic worldview on you at the harm of the most vulnerable, the child inside the womb. And then we also have the SB 25-129 passed the House with amendments, was sent back to the Senate for concurrence on those amendments. And it basically creates Colorado as a sanctuary state for abortion. So if someone leaves the state for because their state has more restrictive abortion laws, say like the state of Arkansas, they want to get an abortion, they can go to Colorado and get that abortion. It amends multiple sections of the Colorado revised statutes to safeguard providers, patients, related entities from out-of-state civil or criminal action. So they're basically protected. If you want to go to Colorado, not only to get an abortion, but also to get quote-unquote gender-affirming care, if that is restricted in your state, then you can go there and you can be protected. Those states that you are coming from can't. Colorado is saying come there and try to come after you for that, which I can't even really imagine that a state would do that. And so Colorado has become a sanctuary state for evil. And not only that, it's also become a sanctuary state for illegal aliens as well. According to Denver7.com, that's the ABC affiliate, the Immigrant Protection Bill, again, just another euphemism, has passed the Colorado Senate. It's moving to the House. It would expand the state's protections on disclosing personal information, including immigration status, and further limit cooperation with federal agents over civil immigration issues, restricting their access to non-public areas inside places like jails, schools, and hospitals. Okay, so ICE can't come into the jail and get an illegal alien to deport them. This is just reinforcing that Colorado is a sanctuary state. You'll remember that Tren de Aragua, a violent Venezuelan gang, had taken over apartment complexes in Aurora, Colorado, where there was murder and all kinds of violence happening, where people have died due to the violence that has been inflicted by illegal aliens, whether it's a hit and run or whether it's direct violence like murder, assault. We've seen that in the state of Colorado, and yet Colorado, the Democrats there, care more about protecting these illegal aliens and abortion and gender transition than they actually care about protecting children, protecting families, protecting American citizens in the Colorado. That is the state of the Democrat Party. They can't not be insane. Like they could beat Trump. They could beat Republicans. They could run on the economy. They could try to be representative of the working class. They could pick those 80-20 issues and say, we do them better than Republicans, but they can't. They can't not be insane. They are bound by the gender lobby. They are bound by the illegal alien lobby, and they want destruction for the United States. Everything that is good and that Christians want to protect, the current Democrat Party wants to destroy. Don't be distracted by the criticisms you're seeing by Donald Trump and start thinking, oh, should I have voted for him? I mean, just imagine all that I just explained to you nationalized and made true everywhere. That is what would have happened if Kamala Harris would have become president, okay? And so, no, I mean, I'm not saying you can't criticize Donald Trump or think bad things about anything that he's done, but it is by the mercy of God that we have the administration that we do and not an administration like this running the rest of the country. So there is a church response to what's happening in Colorado, and I'm very thankful for that. In response to HB 25, the protections for transgender individuals, specifically, a small group of pastors and faith leaders from churches across the state of Colorado have banded together. They've formed a coalition to oppose the Colorado legislature passing these bills. They have a website, fight1312.com, has information about the bills as well as resources. They've got sample letters that you can send to your representatives. They're available to Colorado citizens. One of the pastors, Matt Johnson of Brave Church, Colorado, he co-wrote a letter to big churches aimed at targeting the two Democrat senators most likely to flip and vote no on the bills in question. So you can go to fight1312.com and you can see that. Several of the pastors are trying to get the word out about these bills to speak out against them. They hosted a march and a prayer walk against this bill specifically on April 17th, and you can see that advertisement there. They also put up this graphic, 10 reasons to oppose these bills that are an assault on parental rights, on free speech. And so I'm very thankful for the churches in Colorado and what they're doing. I just encourage you to support them, to pray with them, to do what you can to get involved. And there will be weak Republicans, spineless Republicans, and conservatives who don't want to get involved. But I'm very thankful for the Christians there who are putting up a fight, and I just pray that they would continue to do so. All right, we do have some good news. It looks like for once the UK is actually ahead of us in a good way, especially when it comes to this gender madness. So we'll get into that in a second. Let me pause and tell you about our next sponsor. It's Fellowship Home Loans. I'm very thankful for them. They're a new addition to our sponsor roster on Relatable, and I had the privilege of talking to Mike and Brian, who own Fellowship Home Loans, just a couple weeks ago. And let me tell y'all, they are the real deal. They care so much about honoring God in everything they do and every client relationship that they have. They know it is a big responsibility for them to handle a loan and help you buy a house. And so they do so with honesty and integrity. They are a mortgage lending company that offers home financing solutions while integrating Christian values such as honesty, integrity, stewardship. Their main mission is to guide clients through the lending process with faith-based principles, helping them make wise financial decisions aligned with biblical teachings. When you are buying a house, you want to make sure that the people you are working with are aligned with you. Maybe at one point, 20 plus years ago, you could just assume that everyone kind of had your same worldview, that you would be treated with honesty and respect because we're all coming from the same starting point. That's just not true anymore. I know that when I am looking for people to work with, whether it's something as small as, like getting my makeup done, or whether it's making a big purchase, the companies I work with, certainly the sponsors I work with, I just want to make sure that everyone is on the same page. I prefer to work with Christians. I think they work harder. I think they have better quality of work. And at the end of the day, we know that we're serving Christ. So we give each other grace and we're offering that kind of understanding. And that's why I love working with Fellowship Home Loans. And if you are looking to refinance or you are looking to purchase a home, then you need to contact them. I'm telling you, you will not regret it. Go to fellowshiphomeloans.com/Allie. They're adding a $500 credit at closing with my link. That's fellowshiphomeloans.com/Allie. Nationwide Mortgage Bankers, DBA Fellowship Home Loans, Equal Housing Lender. NMLS number 819382. On April 16th, 2025, the UK Supreme Court unanimously ruled that the legal definition of woman under the 2010 Equality Act refers to biological sex, which is it's repetitive, but that's how people say it today for the sake of clarity, excluding quote unquote transgender women, even those with gender recognition certificates, which is a legal document in the UK that allows so-called transgender people to change their legal gender. Now they're saying, I guess, that you can still do that, but for the purposes of bathrooms, for the purposes of prisons, you have to actually be a woman. So the Supreme Court in the UK, their 5 judges led by Lord Patrick Hodge, did not conduct a public vote, but issued a unanimous judicial ruling, which is amazing. The case brought by For Women Scotland, a Scottish feminist advocacy group that protects the rights of women and children, challenged a 2018 Scottish law that included trans women with GRCs in the definition of a woman for public board quotas. The court determined that sex and woman in the Equality Act mean sex at birth, overturning earlier Scottish court rulings. That is another place which has just gone off the deep end when it comes to progressive ideology. So here's what it means regarding single-sex facilities. It means that providers of single-sex facilities, so as I said, changing rooms, refuges for women who are victims of violence, can lawfully exclude quote-unquote trans women, even if they do have that GRC, from women's spaces if it is a proportionate means of achieving a legitimate aim, such as ensuring privacy, safety, or fairness for women. And of course, that's always the case. It's always going to be the case if you have a single-sex facility to make sure that it really is single-sex, that is always going to be the case, that ensures the protection of women. For sports, the ruling provides legal clarity for sports organizations to exclude trans women from female-only categories to ensure fairness and safety, aligning with policies from bodies like World Athletics. However, it does not mandate exclusion. That's the same thing when it comes to single-sex facilities. They can still set their own policies, but they can exclude so-called transition if they want to. So we got some people who are very upset about this. Drag Race UK is apparently a TV show there, and some of these stars from that show are very upset. This person, Davina De Campo, says, "The fight back starts today. We will not go back into the shadows to make you comfortable. F all the way off." And I've seen a lot of very angry protesters who say that they're not going to switch bathrooms and they're not backing down from this. Okay, well, we'll see about that. It doesn't surprise me at all. They are disproportionately extremely violent, which it makes sense because if you are a man that doesn't care about making women uncomfortable, doesn't care about making them feel unsafe, and you are forcing yourself into a women's restroom, that probably means that you are a predator. I mean, because what other kind of man would want to do something like that? The Good Law Project is a UK-based nonprofit that uses legal action to challenge abuses. The Supreme Court cited with FWS, but it didn't hear from a single trans person. Well, it doesn't really matter because that doesn't change reality. J.K. Rowling, who is British, has lived in Scotland. She has been one of the biggest, most prominent voices on the side of reality. She said it took 3 extraordinary, tenacious Scottish women with an army behind them to get this case heard by the Supreme Court, and in winning, they've protected the rights of women and girls across the UK. And now, I mean, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to push very hard for these private businesses and just for institutions to enact policies that are protecting women and girls. Even Richard Dawkins, the famous atheist, he says aggressively dominant male mammals typically urinate to scent mark their territory. And so he's talking about, you'll have to look at it, but he's talking about in reference to some of the signs of these men who think they're women. They, like at these protests, one says, "I love pissing on turfs." And then another one, I guess, is about urinating where they want to. And he says, yeah, this is dominant male mammals. They pee where they want to try to mark their territory and to show their dominance. And so these men who saying they're women, they're acting like other male mammals. And Richard Dawkins says they think they're women, but can you imagine a better walking, talking, reeking advertisement for toxic masculinity? #sex matters. So at least Richard Dawkins understands that. So in a lot of ways, as I said, the UK is ahead of us, and I'm very thankful for that. I mean, they banned puberty blockers in children a little while ago. And so I'm just thankful for the people who are doing exactly what they are supposed to do. And that is raising a respectful ruckus for the things that matter. And Christians should be on the front lines of those things because, again, it's not just that we recognize biology, but we know the importance of biology because we know that God created us biologically and created us in his image. So not only does physical reality have physical and material significance, but also spiritual and eternal significance. And again, if we are called to love our neighbor, then that means we want God's best for them. And God's ways are always best. The most loving thing we can do, both publicly and privately, politically, personally, is agree with God. And I'm very thankful for those who are fighting this fight, and our voices should always be with them. All right. As we close out today's episode, I do have one more ad, and that is from Preborn. If you want to join the fight against abortion, if you want to make sure that you are saving as many lives as possible, then you need to support pro-life pregnancy centers. Preborn is a large network of pregnancy centers across the country, and they are providing free resources like ultrasounds and prenatal vitamins, parenting classes, all kinds of things to make sure that moms who are pregnant and the dads of these babies are feeling supported. We know that when a woman sees that baby on the ultrasound, she is so much more likely to choose life. And that's why Planned Parenthood doesn't want to show women the baby inside the womb. They don't want her to hear the heartbeat because they hate truth. And because we love life and we love truth, we want women to be able to really make an informed choice. We want them to know that they're not alone. That's why Preborn exists. So if you can donate just $28 to Preborn, that covers the cost of a life-saving ultrasound. But whatever you can donate is great. If you can donate $5, if you can donate $5,000, all of it will translate into saving real lives. Go to preborn.com/Allie to donate and to join the fight against abortion. That's preborn.com/Allie. So at the end of all of that, I just want to encourage you that God has placed you where you are at the time that you are in for a specific reason, because this is a God, the one that we serve, the only God that exists. He does nothing arbitrarily. He does nothing accidentally. He's never thrown off. He's never taken aback. He's never wondering what's going to happen next. He's never swooping in to just clean up the mess. But he has placed every single person here purposely. And he doesn't have to, but he chooses to use the obedience, the boldness, the courage, the words, the prayers of Christians to accomplish his purpose. And as I've talked about a lot, but I'm just so encouraged by this, the history of the church is carrying the baton of human dignity and human protection. And the history of the church is culture warring and culture building and fighting against evil. And as I've often said, politics is not the only way to love your neighbor. The culture wars, not the only way to love your neighbor. I wouldn't even say that they are the primary way to love your neighbor, but they are a way to love your neighbor. Because when we're looking at all of these laws, at the other side of all of these laws, the effect of all of these laws, they're on people. They're really on our neighbors. They're on our fellow image bearers of God. They're not just arguments. So when Christians say, I don't want to get involved in politics because I'm afraid of being divisive, well, that's easy for you to say if you don't think that you or your children are ever going to be affected. That's really a much more selfish way to think. It's not loving. It's kind of just like a cop-out. Well, I'm never going to choose abortion, so I guess that doesn't affect me, or my child is never going to have to go through a custody battle where one parent thinks that the child should be the opposite sex. So I just won't have to worry about that. That shows that you care more about protecting yourself, your reputation, your comfort than you do the children on the altar of these things. So I just encourage you to do what you can. It doesn't mean that you have to have a podcast. It doesn't mean that you have to become an activist. It doesn't mean that you have to be on the front lines, but you can contribute something through your obedience. And I'm talking discipling your children in the truth, ensuring their education is filled with biblical truth, ensuring that your pastor, that your elders, that your church members know the laws that are being passed in the state of Colorado or whatever state you're in, knowing who is on the school board, in your local community, and getting involved on whatever level you can. It could just be volunteering at a pregnancy center. All of these things contribute to good outcomes. All of these things amount to collective courage that can really make a difference. And we know in the end, Jesus is coming back. No matter what any legislature does, we know that Jesus wins, but he's not back yet. And so we have to do the next right thing in faith with excellence and for the glory of God, even when that takes courage and sacrifice. It's courage and sacrifice on behalf of the most vulnerable when it comes to these policies. So I just wanted to end on that hopeful note, and we will be back here tomorrow. We'll be having a really interesting episode. I'll be talking to a guest that I've never had on before, Bill O'Reilly, and we'll be talking about all things Trump administration, also be talking a little bit about the future of the papacy within the Catholic Church, a really interesting conversation that you're going to learn a lot from. We will be back here for that tomorrow.